Hey everybody, this is Perch. This I'm not sure this mail was meant for me or meant as a video topic, but there's nothing in here that really reveals anything, and I think it is an interesting video topic. So I'll respond to the mail, but also do it here because it's something worth talking about. Because I think you can get into history, you can talk about comics, you can talk about a bunch of different pieces. So this mail came to me from a creator, by the way, I greatly admire. And when I say I don't think he believes me, but really talented, just incredibly talented, and huge fan of his work, and um, you know, huge fan. I'm gushing, huge fan. So mail goes, hey brother, did you mention something about a study that showed the hot desk model was more expensive in the long run? Sometime around when the DC announcement happened. This announcement was the DC was moving offices and they would be implementing the hot desk model, which basically, well, we'll get to it in a second. One of my friends is battling this model right now. Would love to share that article or whatever my memory seems to say you were saying back then. Absolutely. So I'll send the article. There's a lot of studies that show this. So first of all, what's the hot desk model? And in particular in the creative field, there's a pushback that's saying the hot desk model is not actually new, that this is how studios and other places have worked for a long time, which is kind of a half truth. But the hot desk model is basically where you don't have an assigned space. You don't have an assigned desk. You don't have a space that is yours. Basically, they have these little, oftentimes these little kind of rolling file cabinets, or sometimes a lockers somewhere in the office. You go in, you put stuff in a locker, or you put stuff in one of the filing cabinets, and you find a seat. Kind of like going into a conference room. There's no assigned seats in a conference room unless you're, of course, the CEO, and then you're sitting at the head of the table. But you find a desk and you go. And typically, what happens in reality, people tend to try and just sit in the same space, and there becomes this unspoken kind of territorialism that occurs where it's like that's always my spot. It tends to pop up, but the companies are moving to this because it's cheaper, quite frankly, for them in the short term. They basically just set up tables and they buy some of these lockers or rolling file cabinets, and they're like, all right, we're done. The other thing, HR has advocated for this a lot because they basically say this gets us out of anybody complaining about who's getting an office, who's sitting near the window, who's further or closer away from the bathroom. We get out of that business, and it's like, fend for yourselves. Which is kind of a classic HR move of like, this is going to be great. Now it's just freedom of choice. I can put this lipstick on this pig and gloss it all up, ready for slaughter. But it doesn't. Of course, it doesn't work out that way. Nobody goes into a hot office where, and don't you wish like the hot desk model was like where you had a desk and then some hot model was on top of that desk? That would be sorry. Anyway, I was talking to somebody. I'm like, oh, they're moving to the hot desk, hot office model, and they're like, oh, really? Like with models or like what? Anyway, whatever. Um, I had by the way, as a side effect, I had the pleasure once of going to see Entertainment in the Beverly Hills location. Just had to go there, and the receptionist was sitting there wearing a short skirt and just a bra. And I remember, like it was funny because it was so. I mean, like it was the stereotype of what you'd expect that whole thing to be like. It was crazy. Sorry, moving on and away from that. So the problem is many with this hot desk model. First off, it certainly does not take away people still wanting an office or wanting better location. It just changes the fight to be more, they feel like management's screwing them. Nobody's sitting there going, well, I guess this is just as good as it gets. No, they get resentful, absolutely, to management. So it does not, from an HR perspective, it doesn't cure fights. In fact, it creates new ones, and it just absolutely lowers the overall morale of the office. People believe that they're just being treated like kind of cattle, and they are to a large extent. But the other problem is there's when you say cost, it costs them more. First off, you wind up there's a bunch of different pieces here. The upkeep of a lot of this flex equipment winds up being much more over time. And this is something that Wired has put out. You have to change the tables more. You have to change the seating locations more. And it's really the way you look at it is if you look at a conference room, you do change the seats. You change a lot of the equipment in the conference room more often than you change cubes or offices. And it's simply because you've got more people coming in and out, treating the equipment in different ways. By not personalizing your space, you treat it with less respect as just very standard, very common. It costs more. So you get like the one guy who likes to like poke a pencil into the chair for reasons only known to themselves, and you get that kind of effect. Now, before I get into the other cost stuff, though, real quick, I mentioned that one of the pushbacks in the creative field, and we saw this when DC announced that they're going to go to this model with their new location. A bunch of people were all like mocking them of doing something really unusual and horrific. But in tech and a lot of companies, they're trying this hot desk model. So it's certainly not just comics, and it wasn't a indication of DC itself. But the argument has been, well, creative people are used to a studio-like environment where they come in and they just draw, and they don't have an assigned workspace. They're meant to, they're flexible by nature. Now, the only place where I think that's more true than others is perhaps advertising, where you have had that kind of flex studio model for a while. But generally, that was not done for the reasons they're doing it now. It was done so that advertising pods or teams could quickly get together, do work, and then disperse back. And so it was more of a making it easy for people to move so they could work collaboratively with the people they're in, as opposed to Lord of the Flies style seating arrangement. It's a very different kind of thing. But I've heard that thrown out a bunch, like, well, comic people should be used to this. Not really. I mean, comic people are most used to having a very personal studio because it's at their home. The days of kind of the bullpen and what would go on with Marvel, I mean, it's really, I mean, that's the Marvel offices are a lot smaller than you think. You probably have in your mind this kind of big area. It's Marvel offices are pretty small, quite frankly. But anyway, other places where the cost, certainly you have the productivity. I think if people can't, if people can't, it's not necessarily personalize their space, but feel like they have a quick and easy ability to be quiet, do their work, heads down, focus, which is already kind of dodgy in a cube environment. It gets much worse in a hot desk environment because in order to facilitate everybody just come in, they tend to do away with things like the walls. So many companies literally just have big long tables with chairs, and you just come and you sit somewhere on the table, and there's no walls, there's no privacy. And so people get up, this is where probably what I was referring to, that he was referencing, of articles that have shown that people get up more often. They leave to take phone calls. They do. I mean, it's the time at desk dramatically decreases in the hot desk model, and it makes sense. You don't want to sit there, and any kind of personal business you might have, which may take all of like 2 minutes to take care of, suddenly takes 20 minutes because the person's getting up off the chair, they're going somewhere else. Some of these offices are installing like little phone booths that are meant to give some privacy. But if you're if you're doing a personal call, you don't want to do that either. There's an office I visited, I don't know, a couple months ago, and they had these little phone booths there where it meant to be private conversations. But when you went in, they had zero soundproofing, so you could hear the private conversation outside. It was just kind of a dumb illusion of privacy. But this it adds up. So you have equipment being replaced more often, which is a cost and just a pain to kind of, is a burden to kind of deal with all that stuff. And you have, pretty proven lack of productivity that kicks in. That is an issue, that you get just less out of the employees. And there's a recruitment cost as well. So hot desk model, while some people don't like cubes, they realize that that's a fact of life, more or less, in companies. The hot desk model is being hard rejected by employees, and consider that a lot of employees have now spent 2 years working from home or dealing with, the COVID style of work. And so, it's already going to be tough, and companies are finding it tricky to get them to come back to the office. If they're going to come back to the office to be kind of just herded into a just big open, bullpen with long tables, you're going to have recruitment issues. And companies that have moved to the hot desk model, I think this was in that Wired article as well, are quickly finding that they need to actually bring in cubes and provide some sense of, belonging and privacy if they have any hope of actually recruiting people or getting people to come back to the office. In many cases, with what we're seeing, both kind of in recession and worker shortage and all that stuff, if it's a reasonable field, it's a it's a supply issue, not a demand issue. There's companies have to work to make places attractive and make it reasonable for people to want to come work there. So doing kind of wacky things like this hot desk model is a detriment. You're going to spend more money on recruiting. You're going to have a harder time getting people in. Your departure ratio is going to increase. And so there's all that. The final one, I guess I would say, is that in order to create a swappable hot desk format, you're either going to have to give everybody laptops, or you're going to have to figure out some plug-in docking station kind of model with equipment, which costs more because you've got to be very universal in your equipment, or you mandate everybody is using the same type of machine, same type of drivers, same type. Everybody has to update kind of at the same time. You run into other issues. Now, a lot of companies do give everybody the same laptop. You get your HP, you get your Mac, whatever it happens to be. But the second you have any kind of diversity in your equipment, it makes that docking station capability tougher. And once again, that's more cost, and it's cost that tends to once again be something you have to replace a lot, because you're now asking people to come in and connect to equipment that's not theirs on a daily basis. And this is way different than where a lot of conference rooms have gone to, where you can wirelessly connect via Cisco or whatever you happen to have in there. So it's just more expensive. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend the hot desk model. I will send the article to this guy, and again, love the work. And it's one of those where it costs you more. It seems like less short term because cubes are expensive. I mean, the thing that people don't understand is if you're setting up an office and you're going to go buy cubes, you will be shocked by how much they cost. It is an absurd cost for cubes. And it really is the case of there's not a lot of cube makers, and offices need this to set up their spaces. And so the prices of this stuff have gone up dramatically over the last 20 years. And they seem just stupid expensive and not great. And again, this is kind of what pushed many companies to the hot desk model. The stuff you're buying is expensive. It doesn't even look good. And so a lot of companies will try and do this thing of, well, we'll just buy used, but then you're buying something that looks like a 1980s kind of accounting firm. That's not exciting. And so it's just, you wind up going like, well, if we want to do something modern, and then people trick themselves into going, the millennials like going to Starbucks. So if we have a hot desk kind of model that looks like Starbucks, where people just kind of go up to the table and, we get a kind of butcher board style table and everything. I mean, it sounds good, but it turns out when people go to Starbucks and they hang out there, they mainly want to talk bullshit and drink coffee. And you're trying to set up a place of business. So trying to lure millennials in because to make your location, like so many of these companies, like we'll just go rip out the carpet. We're going to have glossed cement, and then we're going to have an open ceiling concept where you can see like the tubes and everything else like that. We're just going to get some butcher block kind of tables, and we're going to put that down and get some seats, and we're a startup now. Let's it's like you still have to have a place where people actually want to come to work. And if you screw around with that too much, you're going to have a lot of problems. So anyway, thank you for the question, the ability to talk about. I've been able to do videos on things that are a little bit different than normal lately, which I enjoy, but I'm sure there are lots of people like, get to the comics and woke the comics. Anyway, how can maybe I can tie this in somehow. The hot desk format is an SJW plot to defund the cube industry, which is a healthy American business. There you go. There's your hook. Thanks for listening.